I'll give you my gold watch if you guess its price.
I'll give you my gold watch if you guess its price. Jack's voice thundered through the ballroom, his laughter echoing under the chandeliers. The young millionaire CEO dangled the shining piece above a frail old man in worn clothes, turning hunger into a cruel game. Guests in gowns and tuxedos froze, eyes fixed on the scene, waiting for humiliation to unfold. But the old man didn't lower his gaze. His fingers clutched the strap of his patched bag, his breath steady, his silence heavier than the music that had just stopped. Whispers rose like sparks. Who was he? And why did he stand so calmly against such arrogance? What happened next shocked everyone, leaving the glittering room holding its breath, unaware that this night of mockery would turn into a night of truth. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. Crystal glass clinked in the air. Violins spilled warmth across the ballroom, and the scent of champagne drifted like perfume. Beneath chandeliers, men in black tuxedos leaned back in laughter, while women in flowing gowns brushed sequins against marble floors. Everything shone: the mirrors, the jewels, the smiles. Yet by the entrance, shadows moved. An old man, coat torn at the sleeves, shoes swallowing rainwater, a bag heavy on his shoulder. The maitre d' hesitated, trying to block him, but the man's voice carried a weight that cut through politeness. "Just food," he said. "One plate." His tone wasn't begging. It was hunger sharpened into dignity. Some guests turned their heads, amused by the intrusion. Others frowned, offended by the crack in their flawless evening. Jack Whitmore noticed too. From across the room, the young heir's grin widened, as though fate had gifted him a stage. With his hair sculpted, watch gleaming, and a line of admirers at his side, he thrived on spectacle. "Bring him here," Jack ordered casually, like summoning a prop. The crowd shifted, curious. Phones rose discreetly to record. The old man walked slowly across the polished floor. Every step sounded louder than the orchestra, which stumbled into silence. He didn't shrink. His shoulders, though weary, carried an invisible history. Jack studied him with mock interest, tapping the stem of his glass. "What's your name, old-timer?" he asked. The man paused. His voice was low but firm. "Samuel." The name hung in the air, unimportant to the crowd, yet heavy enough that Jack's brow flickered for half a second. He covered it with a smirk. "Well, Samuel, this is a party for people who can afford more than scraps, but let's make it fun for everyone, shall we?" The women in satin leaned closer, whispering. Men in tuxedos snickered, ready for the show. Jack stood tall, savoring the moment, raising his wrist so the chandeliers made the watch blaze like fire. The gold links shimmered, drawing every eye. "This," Jack announced, "is worth more than your entire life. Guess the price, and maybe, just maybe, it's yours." Gasps and giggles rippled. Some clapped, eager for the humiliation about to unfold. A security guard shifted uneasily, but no one intervened. The ballroom had become an arena, the crowd hungry for cruelty masked as entertainment. Samuel did not answer. His gaze lingered on the watch, not with envy, but with something sharper, something Jack wasn't ready to recognize. He adjusted the strap of his patched bag and let the silence stretch. Guests began to grow restless. Someone whispered, "He'll never guess." Another added, "He probably doesn't even know what brand it is." Jack chuckled, spreading his arms as though conducting an orchestra. "Come on, Samuel, don't keep us waiting." The old man finally lifted his eyes. His voice cut through the chatter, calm as a blade sliding free of its sheath. "If I speak," he said, "you may regret giving me the stage." The room froze. It was no longer a game. Jack's smile twitched, but he forced laughter to keep his throne. "Oh, we'll see about that." He shook the watch so it caught the light again, as if daring Samuel to speak. And Samuel, still steady, still unflinching, drew in a breath. He was ready. The ballroom didn't know it yet, but the moment they had laughed for was about to turn into the moment none of them would ever forget. The ballroom buzzed with nervous laughter, the kind that masks unease. Jack twirled his glass, letting champagne spill over his fingers as if the waste were part of the performance. He leaned forward, gold watch catching the glow of chandeliers. "All right, Samuel," he said, voice sharp with mockery. "Let's hear it. Show us what you've got." Samuel's eyes traced the curves of the timepiece, not hurried, not desperate. He tilted his head as though listening. The ticking filled his silence, though no one else heard it. Guests shifted, impatient, expecting nonsense, a wild guess that would earn more laughter. Samuel's lips parted. His words landed clear. $18,950. Limited edition Whitmore signature line, released 11 years ago. He let the sentence settle, then added softly, "Purchased in Zurich, and not by you." The effect was immediate. The chatter evaporated. A woman's laugh strangled mid-breath. Jack's grin faltered, his jaw stiff. For a heartbeat, the ballroom seemed to forget its music, its lights, its wealth. All that existed was the weight of Samuel's voice. "How?" Jack began, then swallowed it with a forced laugh. "Good guess. Lucky number, huh?" He looked around, calling on the crowd's support. "You hear that?" He must have Googled it in his dreams. But no one laughed. Too precise, too sharp. Samuel stepped closer, the soles of his ruined shoes scraping marble. His gaze did not flinch. "This watch belonged to your father," he said. "It was meant to be worn, but he kept it locked away. You wear it now, parading what never truly belonged to you." Gasps cut through the silence. The words burned hotter than the gold. Jack's throat tightened, but he raised his voice, desperate to reclaim control. "Enough! You're bluffing. Just stories from a beggar." His laughter rang hollow, but Samuel wasn't done. His fingers pointed gently, not trembling, toward the crown of the watch. "See the scar near the edge? A mistake in the machining. One of only 50 pieces with that mark. I should know." His voice cracked, not from weakness, but memory. "I designed it." The ballroom erupted with whispers. Phones zoomed in on the watch. The guests' expressions shifted, from amusement to shock, from superiority to suspicion. Jack's mask of arrogance began to crack. He tugged at his cufflink, searching for escape in the details of his own tuxedo. A man in the crowd stepped forward, whispering, "Could it be true? The Whitmore collection?" Another, bolder, asked, "Jack, is he telling the truth?" Jack's smile snapped. "Ridiculous. He's delusional. Security, get this man out." His voice broke at the edges, louder than needed, louder than confidence. 2 guards moved, but Samuel raised his palm. Not a command, an anchor. His words carried weight enough to hold them in place. "You can throw me out, Jack, but before you do, ask yourself why your father never wore this watch. Ask yourself why he hid it, and why you flaunt it now." The music hadn't returned. The air was tight, every chandelier spark now cold. Samuel's presence, ragged yet unshaken, filled the grand room more than all the polished guests combined. Jack's knuckles whitened on the glass, breath caught between fury and fear. The game he had staged so easily had turned. The watch, once a weapon for humiliation, now pulsed with secrets too dangerous to deny. And for the first time in his life, Jack Whitmore felt smaller than the man he tried to mock. Jack forced a laugh, loud and sharp, trying to slice through the thick silence. "You hear this, everyone? The old man thinks he designed it. What's next? He'll say he built the chandeliers too." His words bounced across the ballroom, but the echo felt hollow. The guests weren't laughing with him anymore. Their eyes darted between the gleaming watch and the ragged man standing too firmly for a beggar. Samuel didn't move. His shoulders remained steady, his gaze a calm river against the storm Jack tried to stir. "Mock me if you like," he said softly. "But lies don't erase fingerprints, and mine are etched in every link of that bracelet." Whispers rose in waves. A man in a grey tux leaned to his wife, whispering the precision of his words. He knew the price down to the dollar. A woman clutched her pearls, torn between disbelief and fascination. Jack slammed his glass down on a nearby table. The champagne toppled, bubbling across the linen like spilled guilt. "Enough of this circus," he barked. "He's nothing. Look at him. Rags on his back, dirt on his shoes. You really think a man like that created something worth thousands?" A ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd. His outburst rang too desperate, too defensive. Some looked away, embarrassed for him. Others leaned in closer, hungry for the unfolding drama. Samuel's hand brushed the strap of his patched bag, but he never broke eye contact. "You measure worth by fabric and polish," he said, voice even. "I measure it by work, by craft. I spent years on designs like that. Years you'll never understand because you've never built anything with your own hands." Jack's jaw tightened. His smile cracked into a sneer. "So what? Even if you touched a blueprint once, you ended up here, begging scraps in my world. That's all anyone needs to see." The cruelty stung sharper than laughter. A woman in emerald silk gasped, "Jack!" But he ignored her, pressing forward like a predator chasing cornered prey. "You've lost. Admit it. You're nothing but a liar trying to steal a moment of attention." But Samuel did not flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that Jack could see the steady fire in his eyes. "Careful, boy," he said, low but steady. "You think truth bows to your arrogance, but it has teeth sharper than your pride, and tonight they will show." Gasps broke through the air. Jack stepped back instinctively, bumping into the edge of a table. His hand clenched the watch tighter, as though gripping it could preserve his power. He scanned the crowd, searching for approval, but saw only doubt in their faces. A man near the bar called out, "Prove him wrong, Jack. If he's lying, show us." The challenge cut deeper than Samuel's words. The crowd murmured their agreement, voices layering pressure on the millionaire. Jack's pulse throbbed in his temples. His perfect evening was crumbling. Still, he raised his chin, forcing the mask of control back onto his face. "Fine," he said, teeth clenched in a smile. "If this beggar thinks he knows so much, let's see him prove it. Right here. Right now." All eyes swung back to Samuel. The old man exhaled slowly, like he had waited years for this moment. His hand slipped into the worn bag on his shoulder, fingers brushing against something unseen. The ballroom held its breath, waiting for what he would reveal. Something that could either redeem his claim or destroy it under Jack's glare. The hush in the ballroom was suffocating. Every guest leaned forward, craning their necks toward the old man as his hand emerged from the patched bag. No one breathed. The air itself seemed to hang between Jack's clenched grin and Samuel's weathered fingers. What Samuel pulled out was not gold or glitter but paper. Yellowed edges, creases from years of folding, ink faded but still legible. He unfolded it carefully, his hands steady, almost ritualistic. "Blueprints," he murmured, laying them on the nearest table beneath the harsh glow of the chandelier. The crowd pressed closer, curiosity outweighing etiquette. Jack froze, watching helplessly, as guests bent to see the drawings, intricate sketches of gears, bezels, clasps, each line precise as if etched with patience and love. At the bottom, a signature, elegant but worn by time. Samuel Reed. A murmur tore through the room. Someone whispered, "It's his name." Another gasped, "These are originals." Fingers hovered above the paper, almost afraid to touch. Samuel's eyes stayed fixed on Jack. "I created that line with your father. Every curve, every mechanism, every imperfection. We were partners once until betrayal replaced partnership, until I was cut out." Jack shook his head violently, laughter bursting from his throat like broken glass. "This is absurd. Forged. Old man tricks. You think I'll let scraps of paper ruin me?" His voice cracked, echoing too high. But Samuel didn't back down. He tapped the sketch of the watch's crown, where the scar was drawn in ink. "This flaw was no accident. I noted it the day your father approved the prototype. He called it character. I called it a mistake. You wear it on your wrist now, flaunting a design you never knew had a story." The words landed like stones. The crowd turned their attention to Jack again, eyes narrowing. They weren't looking at a confident heir anymore. They were seeing a man cornered, stripped of control. Samuel's voice dropped, softer, carrying weight that demanded silence. "I never begged for charity, Jack. I begged for justice. Your father promised me recognition, promised me my share. But when profits rose, I was erased. My name vanished, my work stolen, and tonight, under your chandeliers, fate put us face to face." Jack's jaw tightened, veins pulsing in his neck. He tried to scoff, but his voice faltered. "Even if you were part of it, what does it matter now? You're standing here with nothing, while I own everything." Samuel let the words settle, then leaned closer, his stare unblinking. "You owe nothing but debt, not money, truth. And truth has a way of collecting." The room shivered. The orchestra remained frozen, bows mid-air, like statues. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, some recording with their phones, others waiting to see if Jack would shatter or strike back. Jack snatched the papers off the table, crumpling them in his fist. "Lies!" he snapped. "Nothing but stories from a man desperate for attention." He shoved them into his pocket, as if burying them could erase their weight. But the silence of the guests spoke louder than his rage. Doubt had seeped into the marble floors, into the chandeliers, into every champagne glass. And Jack knew he was losing them. Samuel's eyes glimmered with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You wanted me to guess the price of your watch," he said, voice rising just enough for every ear. "But what you never expected was that I would name the price your family made me pay." The words struck like a hammer against glass. For the first time, Jack's laughter died completely, replaced by a flicker of fear. The ballroom seemed to tilt, the glitter of chandeliers dimming beneath the gravity of Samuel's words. Jack still stood tall, but his smirk had curdled, his hand tightening on the crumpled blueprints stuffed in his pocket. He was losing control, and the room could smell it. Samuel reached again into his weathered bag. This time, when his hand emerged, it held not paper but a small velvet case, edges frayed, clasp tarnished with time. Gasps rippled as he placed it on the table and flicked it open. Inside, resting on faded velvet, gleamed another watch, nearly identical to Jack's but aged, worn, and heavier with truth. The crowd surged forward. Murmurs hissed like wind through leaves. "Another one. It looks the same, but older." Samuel lifted it gently, the way a man lifts a relic. "This," he said, "was the prototype, the first of the line, the only one left in my possession." He held it up under the chandelier light. Unlike Jack's polished trophy, this watch carried scratches from workbenches, fingerprints etched into its history. "Compare it," Samuel demanded. "Every flaw, every detail, every mark I put there with my own hands." Jack's face paled. "Fake," he spat. "Cheap imitation. Probably bought from some flea market." But already guests were pulling closer, phones recording, eyes sharp. A jeweler in the crowd, a grey-haired man with glasses slipping down his nose, stepped forward. "May I?" he asked. Without hesitation, Samuel handed him the prototype. The jeweler inspected the crown, the gears, the engraving on the back. His breath caught. "This isn't fake," he announced, voice trembling with awe. "It's authentic. In fact, it's older than the production models. It has the maker's imprint right here." He turned the watch to show faint initials. "SR." A gasp roared across the room. Phones flashed. Someone whispered, "It's true." Another muttered, "He was erased." Jack's chest heaved, fury and fear fighting for dominance. "So what?" he barked, voice cracking. "A dusty old trinket doesn't prove ownership. My father bought this line. He built the empire, not some homeless relic standing here begging." But Samuel's eyes never wavered. He pointed to the watch gleaming on Jack's wrist. "Take it off," he said. "Let them see." The demand sliced through the air. Jack froze. His hand twitched, but refused to obey. The crowd noticed. They whispered louder. "Why won't he take it off? If he's telling the truth, Jack has nothing to fear." The jeweler spoke again, firmer now. "If the scar near the crown matches what's in his drawings, there's no denying it." Jack swallowed hard. Sweat gathered at his temple. His arrogance cracked into silence. The weight of expectation pressed on him from every side, 100 eyes demanding truth. He tugged at the clasp with shaking fingers and finally tore the watch free, slamming it onto the table as though force could erase shame. The jeweler examined it quickly, comparing it against Samuel's prototype and the blueprint still half visible in Jack's pocket. Then he looked up, his voice steady, almost solemn. "It matches. Perfectly. This man isn't lying." The ballroom erupted, not with applause but with gasps, curses, a storm of disbelief. Some guests stepped back from Jack as though his arrogance were contagious. Others stared at Samuel with new respect, shame prickling their skin for having laughed earlier. Jack's throat constricted. His kingdom of glitter and champagne was collapsing, not from poverty or scandal, but from truth unearthed in front of everyone he sought to impress. Samuel closed the velvet case and tucked the prototype back into his bag. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Proof isn't in words, Jack. It's in what remains when lies are stripped away. And in that moment, the golden ballroom no longer belonged to the millionaire heir. It belonged to the man he tried to humiliate, who had risen from shadows carrying nothing but memory, craft, and truth. The ballroom no longer shimmered with celebration. The violins stood mute, their bows frozen mid-air. Laughter had drained into silence so heavy that even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Jack stood at the center, his tuxedo perfect, his jaw tight, but the confidence that once clung to him like cologne had slipped away. No one dared to clap or cheer. Instead, whispers filled the air, sharp, cutting, relentless. He's telling the truth. The watch is his. The Whitmores stole it. Phones recorded every twitch of Jack's face, every bead of sweat on his temple. The humiliation he intended for Samuel had turned into a mirror reflecting his own disgrace. Jack slammed his palm against the table, voice rising above the murmurs. "Enough! I don't care about your trinkets or your stories. My father built Whitmore Industries. He made it what it is today, and nothing you say changes that." But the cracks in his voice betrayed him. His denial clung to desperation, not conviction. The guests shifted, some averting their eyes, others leaning in, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Samuel stood still, like an anchor against a storm. His voice dropped low, carrying more weight than Jack's shouts. "Your father built an empire, yes, but he built it on sand, on betrayal, on the backs of men like me." His hand brushed the velvet case once more before letting it rest at his side. And he knew it. That's why he never wore this watch. It was a reminder of me, of what he took. Jack's breath caught. For the first time his eyes flickered, not with rage but with something darker. Fear. The crowd stirred, restless. A man in a tailored suit spoke aloud. "Is that true, Jack? Did your father steal from him?" Another voice followed. "Why would he hide it if it was clean?" Jack opened his mouth but found no words. His hands clenched, trembling now, his mask cracking with every second of silence. Samuel stepped forward, closer, his voice steady as steel. "I didn't come here for pity. I came because I knew the truth would find me again. Your family erased me, Jack, took the patents, the profits, the recognition, and left me with nothing but scraps and shadows." He paused, his eyes glistening with fire and grief. "And while your father drowned in guilt, you drown in arrogance." The words struck harder than proof. They weren't numbers or blueprints. They were wounds laid bare. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the weight of generational sin pressing down on the gilded room. Jack tried to stand taller, his voice rising in panic. "Lies! All of it! You're just a bitter old man clinging to fantasies. My father owed you nothing." But Samuel's reply was sharper than glass. "Then why," he asked, "did he send me letters apologizing? Why did he promise restitution he never gave? And why?" His hand slipped back into his bag, pulling another folded paper, this one sealed with wax. "Do I hold the proof he never meant for you to see?" The seal cracked under Samuel's trembling fingers, revealing aged ink. Gasps shot through the crowd as the letter unfolded. The signature at the bottom was undeniable. Henry Whitmore. Jack's face drained of color. His lips parted, but no sound came. The guests surged forward, phones rising higher, eyes wide. The heir who had mocked a hungry man now stood stripped, his father's confession dangling in the old man's hand. The silence in the ballroom was no longer awkward, it was suffocating. Every person knew they were witnessing not just humiliation, but a legacy unraveling. The letter trembled only slightly in Samuel's hands, though his voice when it rose was clear as a bell. He didn't rush. Each word fell heavy, deliberate, echoing against the marble walls, where moments ago only laughter had lived. "Samuel," he began, eyes scanning the faded ink, "I write to you not as a partner, not even as a friend, but as a man consumed by guilt. The Whitmore name has prospered because I silenced yours. I took what was not mine and buried the truth beneath contracts and lies. My son will inherit this empire, but he will never know the cost. I hope one day you find justice, even if it is not from me." Gasps ripped through the crowd. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. The ballroom, once a palace of glitter, had become a courtroom, and Henry Whitmore's confession was the gavel striking down. Jack staggered backward as if struck, his face flushed red, then drained pale, his body trembling under the weight of his father's words. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "He would never. He wouldn't." But the letter bore his father's unmistakable hand, his signature carved in ink like a final act of truth. Guests erupted with whispers that cut deeper than knives. All these years, built on theft. The Whitmores aren't as pure as they claim. He destroyed that man's life. A woman in a diamond necklace turned to her husband, her voice sharp. "We invested in lies." Another snapped, "This changes everything." Jack's panic sharpened into anger. He lunged toward Samuel, snatching at the letter, his voice raw. "You forged this. You think you can walk in here and destroy my family's name with one piece of paper?" But Samuel held firm. His grip was iron despite his frail frame. His eyes met Jack's, steady and unyielding. "Your father's ghost speaks louder than your denial, and every guest here has heard it." The jeweler stepped forward again, voice grave. "That signature, it's authentic. I've seen Henry Whitmore sign countless contracts, there's no mistaking it." The crowd gasped anew. Phones tilted, capturing every second. Streams were already live, comments pouring in online. Jack wasn't just losing the room, he was losing the world beyond it. Samuel folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into his bag with reverence, as though sealing away not proof, but a wound reopened. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. His voice remained steady, heavy with quiet dignity. "This was never about revenge. It was about truth. The truth your father carried to his grave and the truth you tried to bury under arrogance." Jack's chest heaved, his words tumbling out in frantic fragments. He was weak, a mistake, he didn't mean it, But the excuses fell flat against the silence. No one believed him, no one laughed. The ballroom stood in judgment, and Jack was guilty in every pair of eyes. A guest near the back, emboldened, shouted, "Apologize to him." Another added, "Give him what he deserves." The voices multiplied, merging into a wave of demand. Jack's hands shook. His empire, his pride, his carefully crafted mask, all were crumbling under the weight of his father's confession and Samuel's unbreakable stance. He looked around the room, but there was no escape. The walls glared down, the chandeliers cast him in harsh light, and every face demanded what he couldn't bear to give. Samuel said nothing more. He didn't need to. The silence that followed was louder than Jack's screams, louder than the music that had died hours ago. The proof was undeniable. The truth final. And Jack Whitmore, once untouchable, now stood small, naked before the legacy his family had stolen. The silence pressed down like a weight too heavy for marble to hold. Chandeliers glittered coldly above, their light no longer warm but merciless, illuminating every crack in Jack Whitmore's composure. He stood in the center of the ballroom, his tuxedo immaculate yet useless, his skin slick with sweat. No one applauded, no one dared sip champagne. The crowd that once adored him now stared with sharp, unforgiving eyes. Phones hovered like daggers, capturing every second for the world outside. Jack's voice, once commanding, had dried into silence. Samuel remained still, his patched coat hanging from his shoulders, his weathered hands folded in front of him. He didn't need to speak. His calm was louder than Jack's frantic breaths. Then a voice from the crowd pierced the silence. "Say something, Jack." It was sharp, demanding. Another followed. "Do you deny your father's words?" Jack's lips parted, but nothing came. He glanced around, desperate for allies, but the friends who had laughed with him earlier now stood back, eyes lowered. Not one person stepped forward to shield him. Samuel finally moved, one slow step toward him, his gaze unblinking. "The price was never about gold, Jack," he said softly. "It was about dignity. And tonight, you've spent it all." The words stung deeper than any accusation. A murmur swelled in the room, anger, disbelief, shame. Some turned their cameras closer, others muttered curses under their breath. The tide of judgment was unstoppable. Jack lashed out, his voice cracking under the weight of the moment. "He's lying, all of it, lies. My father was a great man, a genius. He didn't steal from anyone." His voice rose to a scream, desperate, breaking. "I am Whitmore. This empire is mine." But the outburst only deepened the silence that followed. His words echoed hollow against marble, against velvet, against faces that no longer admired him. Even the orchestra, instruments still poised, refused to move. A woman near the front spoke, her voice steady. "You can't shout away the truth." Her words were quiet, but they cut Jack like a blade. Another voice, louder now. "Apologize, he deserves it." The crowd shifted closer, pressure closing in, their whispers turning into a chorus. "Apologize, apologize, apologize." Jack's breath hitched. He stumbled back a step, eyes wide, as if the voices themselves were pushing him toward the edge. His hands clenched, unclenched, searching for control he no longer had. Samuel didn't move closer. He didn't need to. He simply stood, silent, his presence heavy, unshakable, as the crowd pressed Jack into submission. Finally, Jack's shoulders sagged, his mask cracking beyond repair. His voice came out broken, barely audible. "You don't know what it's like," he whispered, "to carry his name, to live in his shadow, to be told every day that you must be greater, stronger, richer. He stole your work, but he stole my life too." The confession slipped like blood from a wound. The guests stilled, their anger colliding with pity. For the first time, Jack wasn't a millionaire heir. He was a boy crumbling under the weight of a legacy built on lies. Samuel's gaze softened, but his words remained firm. "Pain doesn't excuse cruelty. You tried to bury a man who only asked for food. And in that moment, you became your father's worst echo." The silence that followed was unbearable. Every guest waited for what would come next, for Jack to either collapse under the truth or rise, changed before their eyes. Samuel drew in a long breath, as if summoning decades of silence and pain into one final surge of truth. His eyes swept across the glittering room, taking in every guest, every phone, every face, frozen in judgment. When he spoke, his voice carried not anger but something heavier. Memory. "I was 25, he began. Fresh out of trade school, with nothing but sketches in my hands and fire in my chest. Your father saw me. He said I had genius, vision. He invited me into his home, into his company. For years I worked by his side, believing I was building a future, not just for him, but for both of us." The guests leaned closer, rapt. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, as though the ballroom itself bowed to the weight of his story. Samuel's gaze shifted back to Jack. "But when the first designs were ready, the Whitmore line, the collection that made your family's empire, my name vanished from every contract. The day before launch, I was called into an office, told I was no longer needed. My sketches were gone. My rights dissolved in legal ink I couldn't afford to fight. And by the time the advertisements hit, every creation I had made bore only one name: Whitmore." Gasps rippled. The words struck with the precision of gears locking into place. The puzzle was complete, undeniable. Samuel's jaw tightened, his voice trembling now with emotion he couldn't contain. "I lost everything. My savings, my reputation, my home. I wandered from shop to shop, begging someone to believe the designs were mine. But your father's lawyers buried me. My wife left, unable to live under the shadow of disgrace. I watched my daughter grow up from afar, ashamed to stand at her door with nothing but truth she couldn't eat." A hush fell so deep that even the air seemed to ache. Some guests lowered their eyes, guilt prickling their skin. Others bit their lips, shame burning as they remembered their own laughter earlier in the night. Jack staggered, his eyes wide, his chest heaving. "No," he whispered, though the denial lacked force. "He wouldn't. My father wouldn't." Samuel cut him off with a glance, not cruel but final. "Your father was many things, Jack. Brilliant, yes. Charismatic, yes. But he was also a thief. And his greatest theft wasn't my designs. It was my life." Tears glimmered in the old man's eyes, but he didn't let them fall. His voice rose, firm and unyielding. "Tonight, I didn't come here to beg. I didn't come to drag him through the mud of memory. I came because when you raised that watch like a weapon, mocking hunger with gold, I realized the past hadn't stayed buried. It lived in you, in your arrogance, in your cruelty, and I couldn't let it breathe anymore. The room shuddered with silence, broken only by a woman's sob near the back. Others shook their heads, murmuring, "How could they? All these years." Jack's knees bent slightly, as though the weight of the story pressed him down. His voice cracked, raw, stripped of pride. "He lied to me. My whole life." He buried his face in his hands, tuxedo sharp but spirit crumbling. Samuel's tone softened, almost tender. "I don't blame you for his sins, but tonight you wore them like a crown, and that's why you had to hear the truth." The crowd inhaled as one, the tension unbearable. They knew the next words, the next gesture, would decide whether this night ended in ruin or redemption. Jack's hands shook as they fell from his face, his eyes red, his breath uneven. The ballroom, still frozen in silence, waited for him to rise as the arrogant heir once more. But the mask was gone. The proud grin, the polished cruelty. It had all shattered under the weight of his father's sins and Samuel's truth. Slowly he looked at Samuel, not with scorn, not with denial, but with the hollow gaze of a man seeing himself for the first time. His lips parted, trembling. "I don't know how to carry this," he whispered, his voice almost childlike. "All my life I believed I was inheriting greatness, but now I see it was built on your ruin." Samuel didn't answer. He simply stood there, weary yet unbowed, his silence giving Jack space to stumble toward dignity. The crowd pressed closer, restless. A voice called out, "Make it right, Jack!" Another followed, "Return what was stolen!" The murmurs swelled into a demand, a chorus rising from velvet gowns and black tuxedos. Jack swallowed hard. His hand moved slowly to the gold watch lying on the table, its surface glinting under the chandeliers. He picked it up, stared at it as though seeing it for the first time. His reflection stared back, distorted by the curved glass. His voice cracked. "This was never mine." With trembling fingers, he stepped forward and held it out to Samuel. "It should have been yours all along." Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. The arrogant millionaire, who hours ago had mocked a starving man, now stood offering back the very symbol of his family's deceit. Samuel looked at the watch, but did not reach for it. His voice was steady, stripped of bitterness. "I don't need gold to reclaim who I am, Jack. Dignity doesn't fit in a case or a clasp, it lives here." He touched his chest gently. "And tonight, before all these witnesses, it has been returned." The room fell utterly still. Even the chandeliers seemed to glow softer, as if honoring the weight of his words. Jack lowered his hand, tears streaming freely now. He placed the watch on the table, not forcing it on Samuel, but laying it down as an offering, a surrender. His shoulders sagged. He was no longer the heir, the host, the arrogant millionaire. He was simply a man stripped bare, facing the wreckage of truth. Samuel turned, scanning the room. His eyes met the guests who had laughed at him when he first walked in hungry and invisible. Many lowered their gazes in shame. Some mouthed apologies. Others wept silently, shaken by the story that had unfolded before their eyes. At last, Samuel straightened his shoulders, his frail frame carrying a weight far greater than jewels or silk. His voice carried across the marble hall, final and unshakable. "Humiliation was never mine to bear. It was always yours. And now, it ends." For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, applause broke out. Not polite, not forced, but raw. It spread like fire, clapping that shook the chandeliers, that echoed off marble, that lifted Samuel higher than wealth ever could. Jack didn't look up. He stayed bowed, broken in the center of the storm. And Samuel, the man once erased, walked out, not with gold on his wrist, but with something brighter, his name restored, his dignity untouchable. The night had begun with cruelty. It ended with redemption, and everyone who witnessed it knew they would never forget the price of truth. The chandeliers dimmed, the crowd dispersed, and silence lingered where arrogance had once filled the room. Samuel left without the gold watch, but with something far greater. The return of his name, his dignity, and the quiet strength no one could steal again. Jack remained behind, humbled, his pride shattered, but his heart forced open to a truth he could no longer deny. This story reminds us that no wealth, no empire, no title can erase the value of honesty and the weight of justice. Dignity lives not in riches, but in resilience, and even when buried under betrayal, it can rise again. And sometimes, the greatest redemption does not come from revenge, but from standing tall when the world expects you to bow. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of dignity and family. And above all, thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul. And before you go, watch the story I leave here on the left. I'm sure it will also move you and make you reflect.